Scholarship student expelled for cafeteria theft. Investigation reveals shocking truth about Principal Lear. Hello. Welcome. Leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. She never imagined that her dream of escaping poverty would end in complete humiliation. Lisa, a scholarship student who had worked tirelessly to earn her place, found herself standing in the middle of the crowded school cafeteria, her heart pounding as eyes turned toward her. An accusation, a theft she didn't commit. The room filled with whispers, judgment, and disbelief, and before she knew it, her entire world shattered in a matter of seconds. She wasn't just expelled, she was labeled a thigh. What could lead a young girl full of promise and hope to lose everything in an instant? What truth lies buried beneath the surface, hidden in the shadows of those she thought she could trust? As the pieces of her life fall apart, Lisa must face a reality far more twisted than she ever imagined. The question is, will she find the strength to fight back, or will the truth destroy her completely? This is not just a story about injustice. This is a story about how far people will go to hide the darkest of secrets, and what happens when those secrets finally come to light. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crowded hallways of Westbrook High School as Lisa Thompson made her way to her locker. At 17, she stood out from the sea of students, not just because of her striking dark skin and tightly coiled hair, but because of the quiet determination etched on her face. As one of the few scholarship students at this prestigious institution, Lisa carried herself with a mix of pride and caution, knowing that her presence here was both an accomplishment and... Lisa's fingers trembled slightly as she dialed her locker combination. Today marked the start of her final semester, the last hurdle before she could grasp the future she'd worked so hard to secure. Yale University's acceptance letter, hidden safely at home, felt like a talisman, proof that all her late-night studying and sacrifices were worth it. "Hey, Brainiac," a familiar voice called out. Lisa turned to see her best friend Aisha bounding towards her with a grin. "Ready to crush it this semester?" Lisa allowed herself a small smile. "You know it, we've got this." As they walked to their first class, Lisa couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. This school, with its state-of-the-art facilities and connections to top universities, was her ticket out of the cramped apartment she shared with her mom in the rougher part of town. Every day here was a step closer to breaking the cycle of poverty that had defined her family for generations. The morning passed in a blur of advanced calculus and AP literature discussions. By lunchtime, Lisa's stomach was growling, a reminder of the meager breakfast she'd had that morning. As she made her way to the cafeteria, the usual anxiety crept in. The scholarship covered her tuition, but meals were another story. She'd learned to stretch her dollars, often settling for the cheapest options or going hungry to save money for books and supplies. Today, the smell of pizza wafting from the serving line made her mouth water. Lisa hesitated, then decided to splurge on a slice. It was the start of the semester after all. A little celebration wouldn't hurt. As she sat down at her usual table, a commotion near the entrance caught her attention. A group of students was huddled together, whispering and pointing in her direction. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She'd grown used to being the outsider, but this felt different. Suddenly, Mrs. Garcia, the cafeteria supervisor, was striding towards her table, face twisted in anger. "Lisa Thompson," she barked, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Stand up right now." Confused and frightened, Lisa rose to her feet. The cafeteria had gone eerily quiet, all eyes fixed on her. "Empty your pockets," Mrs. Garcia demanded, her voice dripping with accusation. "Now." Lisa's hands shook as she turned out her empty pockets. I don't understand," she stammered. "What's going on?" "Don't play dumb with me," Mrs. Garcia snapped. "We have witnesses who saw you stealing food from the kitchen. Did you think you could get away with it just because you're on scholarship?" The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. She felt the blood drain from her face as the gravity of the accusation sank in. "No, that's not true," she protested, her voice cracking. "I would never..." But Mrs. Garcia wasn't listening. She grabbed Lisa's arm, her fingers digging into her skin. "You're coming with me to the principal's office now." As Mrs. Garcia dragged her through the cafeteria, Lisa caught glimpses of her classmates' faces. Some looked shocked, others smirked, and a few, including Aisha, seemed genuinely concerned. But no one stepped forward to defend her. The walk to Principal Martin's office felt like a march to the gallows. Lisa's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. This had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. Surely once she explained herself, they would realize the truth. But as she was shoved into the principal's office, the cold look in Mr. Martin's eyes told her this was far from over. "Sit down, Miss Thompson," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. Lisa sank into the chair, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. "Mr. Martin, please," she began. "There's been a terrible mistake." He held up a hand, silencing her. "We have multiple witnesses who saw you sneaking food out of the kitchen. This is a serious offense, Lisa. I'm deeply disappointed in you." "But I didn't do it," Lisa cried, tears welling up in her eyes. "I swear I would never—" "Enough!" Mr. Martin's voice boomed, making Lisa flinch. "I've heard enough of your lies. You've betrayed the trust we placed in you as a scholarship student. I have no choice but to expel you, effective immediately." The word expel echoed in Lisa's ears like a death knell. Her entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. "No," she whispered. "Please, you can't do this. My future, my college—" "You should have thought of that before you decided to steal," Mr. Martin said coldly. "I'll be calling your mother to come pick you up. You have 15 minutes to clean out your locker and leave the premises." Lisa stumbled out of the office, her vision blurred by tears. The hallways that had once represented hope and opportunity now felt like a gauntlet of shame. As she fumbled with her locker, shoving books and memories into her backpack, the whispers and stares of passing students felt like physical blows. How could this be happening? In the span of an hour, her entire future had crumbled to dust. The scholarship, Yale, her dreams of becoming a doctor, all of it gone. As Lisa walked out of Westbrook High for what she thought was the last time, the weight of injustice and despair threatened to crush her. She had no idea that this moment of utter defeat was just the beginning of a journey that would expose corruption, challenge her resilience, and ultimately reveal truths that would shake the very foundations of the school she once called home. With tears streaming down her face, Lisa stepped into the harsh sunlight, leaving behind the shattered remnants of her dreams. Little did she know that this cruel twist of fate would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change her life, but expose a web of deceit that ran far deeper than she could have ever imagined. The Thompson family's small apartment in East Westbrook felt suffocating as Lisa sat on the worn couch, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The events of the day played on an endless loop in her mind, each replay twisting the knife of injustice deeper into her heart. Across the room, her mother Martha paced back and forth, her work uniform still on, anger and disbelief etched on her face. "I just don't understand," Martha said for what felt like the 100th time. "How could they expel you without any real evidence, without even giving you a chance to defend yourself?" Lisa lifted her tear-stained face. "They said they had witnesses, Mom, but I swear I didn't do it. I would never—" Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Martha rushed to her daughter's side, wrapping her arms around her. "I know, baby, I know you wouldn't." She stroked Lisa's hair, her touch a stark contrast to the rough handling she'd endured earlier at school. "We're going to figure this out, I promise." As the evening wore on, the weight of Lisa's expulsion settled over the apartment like a heavy fog. Martha made call after call, to the school board, to local advocacy groups, even to a cousin who worked as a paralegal. But each conversation ended the same way. Without concrete evidence of wrongdoing on the school's part, there was little they could do. Lisa retreated to her tiny bedroom, the Yale acceptance letter still pinned proudly to her bulletin board. She stared at it, the words blurring as fresh tears welled up. How quickly dreams could turn to dust. The next morning, Lisa woke to the sound of her mother's alarm. For a blissful moment, she forgot about yesterday's nightmare. Then reality came crashing back, and the familiar ache settled in her chest. "Lisa," Martha called softly from the doorway. "I have to go to work, but I want you to know we're not giving up. I'm going to talk to my boss about taking some time off so we can go to the school together and demand answers." Lisa nodded numbly, not trusting herself to speak. As the door closed behind her mother, she was left alone with the deafening silence of her shattered future. Across town, in the more affluent neighborhood of West Westbrook, Principal Martin sat in his spacious home office, a glass of scotch in hand despite the early hour. He stared at his computer screen, rereading the email he'd just composed to the school board. The official report on Lisa Thompson's expulsion was succinct, damning, and entirely false. Martin's hand shook slightly as he hit send. A wave of guilt washed over him, quickly replaced by a steely resolve. He had no choice, he told himself. There was too much at stake. His phone buzzed with a text message. "It's done. The problem's been taken care of. Remember our deal." Martin deleted the message, drained his glass, and headed to his car. Another day at Westbrook High awaited, and he had a reputation to maintain. Back at the school, the hallways buzzed with whispers and speculation. Lisa's sudden expulsion was the hottest topic of gossip, with rumors flying fast and furious. "I heard she was stealing for months," one student said confidently to a group of wide-eyed listeners. "My cousin works in the cafeteria, and he said they caught her red-handed." "No way," another chimed in. "I bet it was drugs. Why else would they kick her out so fast?" Aisha, Lisa's best friend, listened to the rumors with growing anger and frustration. She knew Lisa better than anyone at this school, and the accusations being thrown around didn't match the dedicated, honest girl she'd come to love like a sister. During lunch, Aisha approached their usual table, now conspicuously empty without Lisa's presence. She overheard a group of popular girls giggling nearby. "I always knew there was something off about her," one of them said, tossing her perfectly styled hair. "I mean, come on. A scholarship kid from the east side? She probably thought she could get away with anything." Aisha's blood boiled. She spun around, facing the group. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. "Lisa is the most honest person I know. This whole thing is wrong, and deep down, you all know it." The cafeteria fell silent, all eyes on Aisha. For a moment, she saw flickers of doubt and shame cross some faces, but then the spell broke, and the chatter resumed, her words disappearing like ripples in a vast, indifferent ocean. As Aisha sat alone at the table, fighting back tears of frustration, she didn't notice the new teacher, Mr. Daniels, watching the scene with a furrowed brow. He'd only been at Westbrook High for a few weeks, but something about this situation didn't sit right with him. Daniels made his way to the teacher's lounge, his mind racing. As he poured himself a cup of coffee, he overheard two veteran teachers discussing Lisa's expulsion in hushed tones. "It just doesn't add up," one of them was saying. "Lisa Thompson, of all students, she's never been in trouble before." "I know," the other replied, glancing around nervously. "But you know how it is. Best not to ask too many questions around here." Daniels's ears perked up at this, his investigative instincts kicking into high gear. He'd left his job as a journalist to pursue teaching, hoping to make a difference in young lives. But perhaps his old skills were about to become very useful indeed. As the day wound to a close, the impact of Lisa's absence rippled through the school in subtle ways. Her empty seat in AP Calculus was a stark reminder of the sudden void. Mr. Rodriguez, the calculus teacher, paused briefly when he reached her name during roll call, a flicker of sadness crossing his face before he moved on. In the gym, Coach Martinez found himself staring at the track where Lisa had trained tirelessly for the upcoming state championships. She'd been their best hope for bringing home a title. Now, that dream was as shattered as Lisa's academic future. Even Mrs. Patel in the library felt the loss keenly. She'd grown used to seeing Lisa hunched over textbooks during her free periods, always eager to learn more. The quiet corner where Lisa usually studied remained empty, a silent testament to the injustice that had occurred. As the final bell rang, students poured out of Westbrook High, their chatter and laughter a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere that had permeated the day. But for those who knew Lisa, really knew her, an unsettling question lingered in the air. If this could happen to someone like her, was anyone truly safe? Little did they know, the events set in motion by Lisa's expulsion were far from over. In the coming days and weeks, the foundations of Westbrook High would be shaken to their core, as a web of lies, corruption, and long-buried secrets began to unravel. And at the center of it all was Lisa Thompson, a young woman whose fight for justice was only just beginning. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching Martha Thompson's mood as she marched purposefully towards Westbrook High. She'd taken the day off work, determination etched on her face. As she approached the imposing brick building, memories of Lisa's first day here flooded her mind. The pride she'd felt watching her daughter embark on this new chapter, the hope for a brighter future. Now, those memories tasted bitter. Inside the school, the usual morning bustle was punctuated by curious glances as Martha made her way to the main office. Students whispered and pointed, recognizing her as Lisa's mother. The weight of their stares only fueled Martha's resolve. "I need to see Principal Martin, now." Martha's voice was steel as she addressed the receptionist. Moments later, she found herself face to face with the man who had shattered her daughter's dreams. Principal Martin's office, with its polished mahogany desk and wall of achievements, reeked of privilege, a stark contrast to the cramped apartment Martha had left this morning. "Mrs. Thompson," Martin began, his tone carefully neutral, "I understand you're upset, but—" "Upset?" Martha interrupted, her voice low and dangerous. "My daughter's future has been destroyed based on an accusation with no real evidence. Upset doesn't begin to cover it." Martin's jaw tightened. "We had multiple witnesses, Mrs. Thompson. The evidence was quite clear." "Then show me," Martha challenged. "Show me this evidence. Let me talk to these witnesses because I know my daughter and this doesn't add up." A flicker of something, was it uncertainty, passed across Martin's face before his professional mask slipped back into place. "I'm afraid that's not possible. We need to protect the privacy of the other students involved." Martha leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Let me be very clear, Mr. Martin, I will not let this rest. I will fight for my daughter with everything I have. And if I find out there's been even a hint of injustice here, I will rain hell down on this school." As Martha stormed out of the office, she didn't notice Mr. Daniels lingering nearby, having overheard the heated exchange. His journalist's instincts were on high alert. Something about Principal Martin's demeanor didn't sit right with him. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the school library, Aisha sat hunched over her laptop, furiously typing. She'd started a blog detailing Lisa's story, determined to rally support for her friend. As she worked, she felt a presence behind her. "That's quite a story you're writing there." Aisha turned to see Mr. Daniels, the new English teacher, looking over her shoulder. She quickly minimized the window, but not before he'd caught a glimpse. I'm just," she stammered. Daniels held up a hand. "It's okay, I'm not here to stop you. In fact," he glanced around before leaning in closer, "I think you might be onto something important." Aisha's eyes widened. "You believe Lisa's innocent?" Daniels nodded slowly. "Let's just say I have some questions about how this whole situation was handled, and I think you and I might be able to help each other find some answers." As Aisha and Mr. Daniels began to compare notes, a seed of hope took root. Perhaps Lisa's story wasn't over yet. Across town, Lisa sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at college brochures for community colleges and trade schools. The thought of giving up on her Ivy League dreams felt like a physical ache. But what choice did she have now? A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Jamal, a classmate from Westbrook, standing awkwardly in the hallway. "Hey, Lisa," he said, shuffling his feet. I wanted to talk to you about something." Lisa tensed, bracing herself for more judgment or accusations. But as Jamal spoke, her eyes grew wide with shock and growing anger. "I saw something the day you were expelled," Jamal confessed. "Something that didn't make sense, but I was too scared to speak up then. I'm sorry." As Jamal's story unfolded, Lisa felt a mix of emotions: relief at having someone believe in her innocence, rage at the injustice she'd suffered, and a growing suspicion that there was more to her expulsion than a simple misunderstanding. Back at Westbrook High, the final bell rang, signaling the end of another school day. As students streamed out of the building, a small group lingered behind: Aisha, Mr. Daniels, and now Jamal, brought in by a quietly hopeful Lisa. They gathered in Mr. Daniels' classroom, voices low as they began to piece together the puzzle of Lisa's expulsion. None of them realized that their quiet investigation was about to uncover a web of corruption that ran far deeper than they could have imagined. As the group talked, Principal Martin sat in his office, a growing sense of unease gnawing at him. He picked up his phone, dialing a number he'd hoped never to use again. "We might have a problem," he said quietly into the receiver. I think it's time to take more decisive action. The sun set on Westbrook, casting long shadows across the town. In homes and offices, on street corners, and in quiet classrooms, the ripples of Lisa's expulsion continued to spread. Secrets long buried were stirring, and the truth, no matter how ugly, was clawing its way to the surface. For Lisa Thompson, wronged but not defeated, this was just the beginning of a fight that would test her resilience, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately reveal the extraordinary strength she never knew she possessed. As night fell, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Westbrook High to its very foundations. The question was, who would be left standing when the dust settled? The early morning fog clung to the streets of Westbrook as Mr. Daniels made his way to school, his mind racing with the information he'd gathered over the past few days. What had started as a nagging suspicion had blossomed into a full-blown investigation, and the pieces were starting to fall into place. Pieces that painted a disturbing picture of corruption and prejudice at the highest levels of Westbrook High. As he turned the corner onto the school grounds, a figure emerged from the shadows, causing him to start. It was Jamal, looking nervously over his shoulder. "Mr. Daniels," Jamal whispered urgently, "I found something big." Daniels ushered the boy into his classroom, locking the door behind them. "What is it, Jamal?" With trembling hands, Jamal pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his backpack. "I was helping clean out the storage room for detention yesterday, and I found this shoved behind an old filing cabinet." Daniels smoothed out the paper, his eyes widening as he scanned its contents. It was a list of names, all students from lower-income backgrounds or minority groups who had been expelled or encouraged to leave Westbrook High over the past 5 years. Lisa's name was at the bottom, circled in red. "My God," Daniels breathed. "This isn't just about Lisa, it's systematic." As the school day began, an undercurrent of tension ran through the halls. Rumors of an investigation had begun to circulate, and students whispered in corners, wondering what secrets were about to be unearthed. In the cafeteria, Aisha sat with a group of students who had begun to question the official story of Lisa's expulsion. Among them was Sarah, a quiet girl from Lisa's AP biology class. I think I saw something," Sarah said hesitantly. "The day Lisa was accused, I was returning a book to the library and I saw..." She paused, glancing around nervously before continuing in a whisper. "I saw Jake and his friends, you know, the rich kids. They were coming out of the kitchen laughing about something. One of them was stuffing food into his backpack." Aisha's heart raced. "Sarah, why didn't you say anything before?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared. Jake's dad is on the school board. I didn't think anyone would believe me over them." As Aisha rushed to find Mr. Daniels and share this new information, across town, Lisa and her mother were preparing for a meeting with a local civil rights attorney. The constant stress of the past week had taken its toll on both of them. Lisa's eyes were ringed with dark circles, and Martha's usually immaculate appearance was showing signs of strain. "We're going to fight this baby," Martha said, squeezing Lisa's hand. "All the way to the top if we have to." Lisa nodded, a spark of her old determination returning to her eyes. "I know, Mom, and not just for me, for all the other students who've been wronged." Meanwhile, in the plush office of Westbrook High's biggest donor, Principal Martin sat nervously across from Theodore Blackwell III, Jake's father, and the most influential member of the school board. "This situation is getting out of hand, Martin," Blackwell said, his voice cold. "I thought you had taken care of it." Martin wiped sweat from his brow. "I'm doing my best, sir, but there are people asking questions. That new teacher, Daniels..." "Then silence them," Blackwell interrupted. "Whatever it takes, we've worked too hard to maintain Westbrook's standards, to let it all fall apart now." As Martin left Blackwell's office, the weight of years of compromised ethics and buried truths pressed down on him. He had a choice to make, and the clock was ticking. Back at the school, Mr. Daniels had gathered Aisha, Jamal, and a few other trusted students in his classroom. The evidence they had collected was spread out on his desk: the list of expelled students, Sarah's testimony, financial records showing discrepancies in the scholarship fund. "What we're dealing with here," Daniel said gravely, "is much bigger than we initially thought. This isn't just about Lisa. It's about a systemic effort to push out students who don't fit a certain profile." The students exchanged shocked glances. The implications were staggering. "So what do we do now?" Aisha asked, her voice filled with a mix of anger and determination. Before Daniels could answer, there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze. Daniels cautiously opened it to find Lisa standing there, her eyes blazing with purpose. "I heard you were looking for the truth," she said. "I'm here to help you find it." As Lisa joined the group, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The pieces were coming together, and the truth, however ugly, was about to be exposed. Across town, Martha Thompson sat in the office of the civil rights attorney, laying out everything they knew so far. The lawyer listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "Mrs. Thompson," he said finally, "what you're describing here isn't just a case of wrongful expulsion. If what you're saying is true, we're looking at a potential class action lawsuit, discrimination, misuse of funds, possible criminal charges." Martha's eyes widened as the full scope of the situation began to dawn on her. This wasn't just about getting Lisa back into school anymore. It was about exposing a deep-rooted system of injustice that had been destroying young lives for years. As the sun began to set on Westbrook, the various players in this unfolding drama were set on a collision course. In homes, offices, and classrooms, people were making decisions that would change lives forever. Lisa, surrounded by her newfound allies, felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. The truth was coming to light, and with it, the chance not just to clear her name, but to fight for something much bigger than herself. Little did any of them know the biggest revelations were yet to come. The next 24 hours would shake Westbrook High to its very foundations, exposing secrets that would forever change the face of the school and the town itself. As night fell, a storm was brewing, both literally and figuratively. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a fitting backdrop to the tumultuous events about to unfold. The stage was set for a confrontation that would leave no one untouched, and by the time the sun rose again, nothing in Westbrook would ever be the same. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke as Martha Thompson's car pulled up to Westbrook High. Rain lashed against the windshield, matching the turbulent emotions inside the vehicle. Lisa sat in the passenger seat, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, while Mr. Daniels occupied the back, a folder of damning evidence clutched to his chest. "Are you ready for this?" Martha asked, turning to her daughter. Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I have to be, Mom. It's not just about me anymore." As they stepped out into the downpour, they were met by Aisha and a small group of supporters, students and parents who had rallied to their cause. The sight gave Lisa a much-needed boost of courage. Inside the school, an emergency board meeting was already underway. Principal Martin sat at the head of the table, his usual confidence replaced by a sickly pallor. Board members murmured amongst themselves, the tension in the room palpable. Theodore Blackwell III's voice cut through the chatter. "This is ridiculous. We can't allow ourselves to be bullied by baseless accusations from a disgruntled student." Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. Martha Thompson strode in, followed closely by Lisa, Mr. Daniels, and their supporters. The room fell silent. "Baseless?" Martha's voice rang out, filled with righteous anger. "I think not, Mr. Blackwell. We have evidence of a long-standing pattern of discrimination and corruption in this school, and we demand to be heard." Principal Martin rose to his feet, his voice shaking. "This is a closed meeting. You can't just—" "Oh, I think we can," Mr. Daniels interjected, stepping forward to place his folder on the table. "Especially when we have proof of misappropriation of funds, targeted expulsions of minority students, and a cover-up that goes all the way to the top." The room erupted into chaos. Board members talked over each other, some demanding to see the evidence, others calling for the group to be removed. Through it all, Lisa stood tall, her eyes locked on Principal Martin. "Why?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "Why did you do this to me, to all of us?" Martin's face crumpled, the weight of years of compromise finally breaking him. I had no choice. The pressure to maintain the school's reputation, to keep the donors happy. No choice?" Lisa's voice rose, filled with passion and pain. "You had every choice. You chose to sacrifice students like me to protect your precious reputation. You chose to stay silent when you knew it was wrong. As Lisa spoke, a hush fell over the room. Even Blackwell, who had been blustering about lawsuits and gag orders, fell silent in the face of her raw emotion. Mr. Daniel seized the moment. "We're not here to destroy Westbrook High," he said, addressing the board. "We're here to save it, to make it live up to the ideals it claims to uphold. But that can only happen if we confront the truth, no matter how ugly." For the next hour, the evidence was laid out. Financial records showing how scholarship funds had been diverted. Emails revealing the targeted campaign against students from lower-income backgrounds. Testimony from students who had been pushed out or silenced. As the full scope of the corruption came to light, the mood in the room shifted. Some board members were visibly shaken, others angry at being kept in the dark. Blackwell, seeing the tide turning, attempted to distance himself from the scandal, but his own son Jake, racked with guilt, stepped forward to confess his role in framing Lisa. Outside the meeting room, word spread quickly. Students and teachers gathered in the halls waiting with bated breath for news. Among them was Sarah, the quiet girl who had finally found the courage to speak up. As the night wore on, decisions were made. Principal Martin, along with several other administrators, would be placed on immediate leave pending a full investigation. An independent committee would be formed to review all expulsions and disciplinary actions from the past 5 years. And Lisa would be officially reinstated, her record cleared. But for Lisa, this victory felt bittersweet. As she emerged from the meeting room, exhausted but unbowed, she was met with a sea of faces, some apologetic, some in awe, all forever changed by the night's events. "What happens now?" Aisha asked, hugging her friend tightly. Lisa looked around at the school that had been both her dream and her nightmare. "Now," she said, her voice filled with determination, "we rebuild. We make sure this never happens to anyone else again." As the storm outside began to abate, a new day was dawning for Westbrook High. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and hard truths. But for the first time in years, there was hope. Hope for a future where every student, regardless of their background, would have a fair chance to succeed. Lisa Thompson, the girl who had lost everything and fought to reclaim not just her future but the futures of countless others, stood at the center of it all. She had entered Westbrook High as a scholarship student with dreams of changing the world. Now, in ways she never could have imagined, she was doing just that. As the first rays of sunlight began to pierce the clouds, Lisa stepped out of the school, her head held high. The battle was far from over, but with truth and justice on her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For in exposing the darkness at Westbrook High, Lisa had not only reclaimed her own light but had become a beacon of hope for others. The story of Westbrook High's transformation was just beginning, and Lisa Thompson would be at the forefront, ensuring that the promise of education and opportunity would be open to all, not just the privileged few. As she walked towards the rising sun, Lisa knew that this was not the end of her journey but a new and powerful beginning. The following weeks at Westbrook High were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. As news of the scandal broke, the quiet suburban town found itself thrust into the national spotlight. News vans lined the streets, reporters clamoring for interviews with Lisa, her supporters, and anyone else willing to speak about the corruption that had been unearthed. Inside the school, the atmosphere was tense but charged with a strange energy. Students who had never interacted before found themselves united in their shock and desire for change. The hallways buzzed with conversation, debates, and impromptu meetings as everyone tried to process what had happened and what it meant for their future. Lisa, despite her reinstatement, found herself struggling with mixed emotions. The stares and whispers that followed her through the halls were no longer accusatory, but they still set her on edge. She was grateful for the support, yet the weight of her newfound role as a symbol of change sometimes felt overwhelming. One morning, as Lisa stood at her locker, a tentative voice behind her made her turn. "Lisa, I wanted to apologize." It was Emily, one of the popular girls who had been quick to believe the worst about Lisa when the accusations first surfaced. Now she stood there, eyes downcast, fidgeting nervously. Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Go on," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you," Emily blurted out. I should have known you'd never do what they said. But I was scared. Scared of losing my own place here. It was wrong, and I'm so sorry." For a moment, Lisa said nothing, the silence stretching between them. Then slowly she nodded. "Thank you for saying that, Emily. It means a lot." As Emily walked away, visibly relieved, Lisa felt a small knot of tension inside her loosen. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Mr. Daniels had thrown himself fully into the role of lead investigator for the independent committee. His classroom had become a makeshift headquarters, walls covered in timelines and connections, as he and a team of volunteers worked tirelessly to uncover the full extent of the corruption. One afternoon, as Daniels was poring over financial records, he stumbled upon something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't just scholarship funds that had been misappropriated. There was evidence of a much larger scheme involving kickbacks from college admissions offices, funneled through a series of shell companies. "Dear God," Daniels muttered, his hands shaking as he picked up his phone to call Martha Thompson. This goes way beyond Westbrook High. Across town, Theodore Blackwell III sat in his opulent home office, a glass of scotch in his trembling hand. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. His son Jake, racked with guilt, had confessed everything to the authorities. Now, Blackwell was facing not just public humiliation but potential criminal charges. As he contemplated his options, a news alert on his phone caught his eye. His face drained of color as he read the headline: FBI launches investigation into nationwide college admissions scandal. Westbrook High at center of storm. Back at the school, Lisa was in the middle of AP Calculus when her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Mr. Daniels. "Need to see you ASAP. Big breakthrough." Excusing herself, Lisa rushed to Daniels' classroom, her heart pounding. When she arrived, she found not just Daniels but also her mother, Aisha, and several members of the investigative committee. Their faces were a mix of shock and grim determination. "Lisa," Daniels said, his voice grave, "what we've uncovered, it's bigger than we ever imagined. The corruption at Westbrook, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We're looking at a nationwide network of fraud and bribery in college admissions." Martha stepped forward, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Baby, I know this is a lot, but what you started here, it's going to change things for so many people. You've exposed something that's been hurting students across the country for years." Lisa felt dizzy, the magnitude of the situation hitting her all at once. What had started as a fight to clear her name had snowballed into something that could reshape the entire landscape of higher education in America. As the group began to discuss their next steps, a commotion in the hallway drew their attention. They stepped out to find a crowd gathered around a TV in the common area, all eyes glued to a breaking news report. On the screen, footage played of FBI agents leading Theodore Blackwell III out of his home in handcuffs. The news anchor's voice cut through the stunned silence. In a shocking development, prominent businessman and Westbrook High School board member Theodore Blackwell III has been arrested in connection with a far-reaching college admissions bribery scheme. This arrest comes as part of a larger federal investigation sparked by revelations of corruption at Westbrook High School. The hallway erupted in a cacophony of voices, shock, anger, vindication all mingling together. Lisa stood rooted to the spot, feeling as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted once again. Aisha grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You did it, Lisa, you really did it." As the reality of what was unfolding sank in, Lisa felt a surge of emotions: relief, pride, and a fierce determination. This was far from over, but for the first time since her wrongful expulsion, she felt truly vindicated. The storm that had been brewing for weeks had finally broken, and in its wake a new landscape was emerging. For Lisa Thompson and Westbrook High, this was not an ending, but the beginning of a new chapter. One that would reverberate far beyond the walls of their school and into the very foundations of the American education system. As the news continued to unfold on the screen before them, Lisa squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. The fight for justice and equality in education was just beginning, and she was prepared to see it through to the end. The following days at Westbrook High felt surreal, as if the entire school was holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The arrest of Theodore Blackwell III had sent shockwaves through the community, and with each passing hour, new revelations surfaced, painting a picture of corruption far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Lisa found herself at the center of a media storm. Reporters camped outside her home, clamoring for interviews and statements. She had become, almost overnight, the face of a movement challenging the entrenched inequalities in the education system. One morning, as Lisa made her way through the school gates flanked by Aisha and Mr. Daniels, she was met by a sea of cameras and microphones. For a moment, she froze, overwhelmed by the attention. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "I didn't ask for any of this," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But now that the truth is coming out, I won't back down. This isn't just about me or Westbrook High. It's about every student who's ever been denied a fair chance because of their background or the size of their parents' bank account." Her words, broadcast live across the nation, resonated with thousands of students and families who had long suspected but could never prove the systemic biases working against them. Inside the school, the atmosphere was electric. Students gathered in hallways and classrooms, discussing the latest developments and debating what it all meant for their futures. Even those who had once looked down on scholarship students like Lisa were beginning to question the system that had granted them their privileges. In the midst of the chaos, Principal Martin, now under house arrest and awaiting trial, requested a meeting with Lisa. After much deliberation with her mother and Mr. Daniels, Lisa agreed to see him. The meeting took place in a small conference room at the local police station. As Lisa entered, she was struck by how small and defeated Martin looked, a far cry from the imposing figure who had once held her future in his hands. "Lisa," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know nothing I say can undo the harm I've caused, but I want you to know, I'm sorry, truly sorry." Lisa sat silently, letting his words hang in the air. "I got caught up in a system that I knew was wrong," Martin continued, "but instead of fighting it, I became a part of it. I failed you, and I failed every student who ever walked through those doors trusting me to do right by them." As Martin spoke, laying bare the years of compromise and corruption, Lisa felt a complex mix of emotions: anger, pity, and a grim satisfaction at finally hearing the truth. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked when he finished. Martin met her gaze, his eyes filled with remorse. "Because you deserve to hear it, and because I'm ready to tell the truth, all of it, to the authorities. It's time this whole rotten system was exposed." Lisa left the meeting feeling shaken but resolute. Martin's confession was a key piece of the puzzle, one that would help ensure justice was served not just at Westbrook High, but across the nation. As news of Martin's cooperation spread, the floodgates opened. More administrators and board members came forward, each revelation adding to the growing picture of a nationwide network of bribery and fraud in college admissions. The climax came on a crisp autumn morning, 2 months after Lisa's initial expulsion. The entire student body of Westbrook High, along with parents, teachers, and community members, gathered in the auditorium. On a large screen, they watched as the U.S. Attorney General addressed the nation, announcing a sweeping indictment that included over 50 individuals across 12 states. The investigation that began at Westbrook High School has uncovered one of the largest education fraud schemes in U.S. history, the Attorney General stated. "Today, we take the first step in dismantling a system that has for too long allowed wealth and privilege to trump merit and hard work." As the implications of the announcement sunk in, a wave of emotion swept through the auditorium. There were tears, cheers, and stunned silence. For many, it was the vindication they had long awaited. For others, it was a harsh awakening to the realities of a system they had unknowingly benefited from. In the midst of it all stood Lisa, surrounded by her mother, Mr. Daniels, Aisha, and the growing circle of allies who had stood by her through this ordeal. As the Attorney General continued to detail the charges and the steps being taken to reform the college admissions process, Lisa felt a profound sense of closure. She turned to her mother, tears glistening in her eyes. "We did it, Mom, we really did it." Martha pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "You did it, baby. You stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. I've never been prouder." As the assembly dispersed, the halls of Westbrook High buzzed with a new energy. Students who had once been divided along lines of class and privilege now found themselves united in their desire for change. The truth had been laid bare, and with it came the opportunity to rebuild their school, and perhaps the entire education system, on a foundation of fairness and equal opportunity. For Lisa Thompson, the girl who had dared to challenge the status quo, this was not the end of her journey, but a new beginning. As she walked out of the auditorium, head held high, she knew that the fight for true educational equity was far from over. But for the first time in months, she felt a genuine sense of hope for the future, not just for herself, but for students everywhere who dared to dream of a better tomorrow. The truth had finally triumphed, and in its wake, a new era of accountability and opportunity was dawning. The story of Westbrook High and Lisa Thompson would be remembered not just as a scandal, but as the catalyst for a long overdue revolution in American education. The crisp autumn air carried a sense of change as Lisa Thompson walked up the steps of Westbrook High. It had been 3 months since the explosive revelations that rocked not just their school, but the entire nation's education system. As she pushed open the heavy doors, the familiar buzz of student chatter washed over her, but it felt different now, charged with a new energy, a mix of hope and uncertainty. Lisa's reinstatement to Westbrook High had been swift following the exposure of the corruption scandal. Yet, as she made her way down the hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. Whispers and glances followed her, not of accusation this time, but of awe and curiosity. She was a hero to some, a reminder of uncomfortable truths to others. In her first class of the day, AP Literature, Lisa found herself seated next to Sarah, the quiet girl who had finally found the courage to speak up about what she had seen. Sarah offered a small smile, which Lisa returned. It was a silent acknowledgement of the bond they now shared, survivors of a system that had nearly crushed them. As the teacher began discussing the theme of redemption in The Scarlet Letter, Lisa couldn't help but draw parallels to her own story. She had been branded, judged, and nearly destroyed by false accusations. Now, cleared of all wrongdoing, she was trying to navigate a world forever changed by her ordeal. During lunch, Lisa sat with Aisha and a group of students who had become her allies during the fight for justice. The cafeteria, once a place of dread and segregation, now buzzed with a different kind of energy. Students from all backgrounds mingled more freely, the rigid social hierarchies beginning to crumble in the wake of the scandal. "Hey Lisa," called out Jake, the former ringleader of the privileged crowd who had once tormented her. He approached their table hesitantly. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. What my dad did, what I did, it wasn't right." Lisa studied him for a moment, noting the genuine remorse in his eyes. "Thank you, Jake," she said finally. "It means a lot to hear that." As Jake walked away, Aisha leaned in. "That was big of you," she whispered. Lisa shrugged. "Holding on to anger won't change anything. We need to focus on moving forward, on making sure nothing like this ever happens again." The afternoon brought a school-wide assembly. The new principal, Dr. Amelia Ramirez, stood at the podium, her presence a stark contrast to the disgraced Martin. "Today marks a new chapter for Westbrook High," Dr. Ramirez began. "We have been given a second chance, an opportunity to rebuild our school on a foundation of true equality and merit. It won't be easy. We'll face challenges and setbacks, but together, we can create a school that lives up to its promise of providing quality education for all." As Dr. Ramirez outlined the changes being implemented, from a complete overhaul of the admissions process to new scholarships and support systems for underprivileged students, Lisa felt a mix of pride and bittersweet sadness. The system was changing, but at what cost? After school, Lisa found herself in Mr. Daniels' classroom. The walls, once covered in evidence of corruption, now displayed student artwork and inspirational quotes about justice and education. "How are you holding up?" Mr. Daniels asked, concern evident in his voice. Lisa sighed, sinking into a chair. "It's complicated. I'm glad the truth came out that things are changing, but sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. The stress, the pain, the way everything changed." Mr. Daniels nodded, understanding. "Change is never easy, Lisa, What you went through, what you exposed, it's going to have ripple effects for years to come, not just here but across the country. You should be proud." "I am," Lisa said softly. "But sometimes I just wish I could be a normal student again, you know? Not Lisa Thompson, the girl who brought down the system." As Lisa left the school that day, she paused on the steps, looking out at the campus. Students milled about, laughing and chatting. Everything looked the same, and yet everything had changed. Her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Yale, confirming her scholarship and acceptance for the following year. A small smile tugged at her lips. Her dream was still alive, though the path to it had been far different than she'd ever imagined. Lisa began her walk home, her mind swirling with thoughts of the future. The scandal had exposed deep-rooted problems in the education system, problems that wouldn't be solved overnight. There was still so much work to be done, so many battles to be fought. As she rounded the corner to her street, Lisa saw her mother waiting on their small porch. Martha Thompson's face lit up at the sight of her daughter, and Lisa felt a surge of love and gratitude. They had weathered this storm together, emerging stronger on the other side. "How was school, baby?" Martha asked as Lisa climbed the steps. Lisa paused, considering the question. "It was a start," she said finally. "A new beginning." As they entered their home, Lisa knew that her journey was far from over. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But she was ready to face whatever came her way. She had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose. The scandal at Westbrook High had shaken the foundations of the education system, exposing ugly truths and long-buried injustices. But from the ashes of corruption, a new hope was rising. And Lisa Thompson, once a scholarship student fighting for her future, now stood at the forefront of a movement for true educational equality. As night fell on Westbrook, Lisa sat at her desk, penning a letter to future students of Westbrook High. In it, she poured out her hopes and dreams for a better, fairer education system. She wrote of the importance of speaking truth to power, of standing up for what's right even when it seems impossible. She ended the letter with words that would come to define not just her journey, but the ongoing fight for educational justice across the nation. Never let anyone tell you that your voice doesn't matter. Never stop fighting for what you believe in. And always remember that education is not a privilege for the few, but a right for all. The power to change the world lies within each of us. Use it wisely, use it bravely, and use it for the good of all. As Lisa sealed the envelope, a sense of peace washed over her. The road ahead was long, but she was ready to walk it. For herself, for her mother, for every student who had ever been denied a fair chance. The story of Westbrook High was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning.
Thank you very much for listening to this story. Comment below what you thought of the ending and from which city you're listening to us. If you enjoyed the story and want to hear more, click on the next story that's appearing on your screen now. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories together. See you soon.